What
Yes.
is Digitax?
We're a software platform that simplifies tax compliance.
I mean, would it be fair to say that technically you are disrupting accountants?
We complement them. My first job, I think I was
5 years old.
5 years old. Yeah,
That's your first ever job.
That was my first job. But then in terms of like formal something I could like legally earn, when I went to Japan, they wanted someone to teach them Swahili. That was a very interesting gig, paid very well. Sales is the art of many no's, yeah? Before you get a yes. And you need to build a thick skin to be able to handle that well. There's this notion of, the 10x engineer, like whatever they do, they're 10 times more productive than the average engineer. Now, AI will turbocharge that. You can easily become a 30 or 50x engineer if you know what you're doing. In the software space, there's also, you need to know what to use AI for and what not to use AI for. AI will help the great employees be more productive. Technology does not exist in a vacuum.
Yes.
And yes, we say tech, but tech ultimately has to solve something.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Financially Incorrect. I am your host, Barak, and of course, this podcast is proudly sponsored and powered by none other than FX Pesa, who have a presence in Uganda, in Kenya, and in Tanzania. So, if you're in Tanzania and Uganda and you'd like to attend physical classes to understand how the forex elements work and to understand how FX Pesa can give you access to trading on the global market and the global platform, please do so. You can't do that physically. If you're in Kenya, if you'd like to attend anything physically, please check out the FX Pesa social pages, that is IG, Facebook, and YouTube, to be able to find out when their physical events are. And of course, you'll be able to take all of these classes online no matter where in the world you are. And FX Pesa is a perfect partner to be able to, if you want to use a bit of your extra income to try and make a bit more money on the global market, FX Pesa is a partner for you. All the relevant links are in the description box for you to click on, and you can have access to them. So, and of course, they power our fantastic podcast where we bring you money journeys. And today we have yet another one from none other than Caine Wanjau, who is the current founder and CEO of Digitax. He was former CTO of Twiga Foods. I believe it was Twiga Foods. That's the full name of the company, right?
Yep.
Anyway, welcome to Financially Incorrect.
Thanks, Barak. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah.
And looking forward to a great conversation.
What's your general take on podcasts as a whole?
So, interesting fact. I tried to jumpstart a podcast at some point, and I'd gone all the way to getting the equipment, very similar setup. We even had the fancy lights and everything. And at that point, we actually shot a few episodes. And we then realized, actually, this thing is, it can't be taken as a hobby if you want to do it seriously. You have to give it serious time, effort, and resources. So after the few trial episodes, we decided to focus on our business engagements. But to me, at that point, I was like, I really feel that, podcasting as a medium is something that's going to pick up. That's even why we tried it out. I also have appeared on a lot of podcasts, and it's been good from a networking, even just a sales and awareness standpoint. People have had me on, various podcasts or various forums and saying, I had you on such and such a show. Would like to know more about Digitax. So for me, net, it's something I've been very interested in for a while.
So tell me, first of all, what is Digitax? Is it as simple as it sounds? I mean, the word Digitax sounds self-explanatory.
It's self-explanatory. And what we try to do with our name is make it very relatable. When you hear Digitax, definitely there's tax. And the digi part is, this technology or a digital element to it. But what we are is we're a software platform that simplifies tax compliance. The change and the picture in Africa right now is a lot of governments are looking to streamline how tax is transmitted, and they want this information in real time or near real time. And basically, what we try to do is just make that whole process seamless and convenient for businesses and individuals. So we have built a software platform. We've built various products. We have an app. We have a web platform. We also have integration options. So basically, we try meet you where you are and ensure your tax compliance journey is straightforward as possible. At least from a technology standpoint, tax has many elements to it. There's a law, there's a tax itself, but in terms of the technology and making that process as straightforward as possible, that's the space we play in. Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that technically you are disrupting accountants, or and by accountants I mean for small and medium, enterprises where usually you'd have, I guess, a fractional accountant or a fractional someone, or even if you're an employee with a with a side business, you have an accountant who you reach out to at the end of the year to be like, oh yeah, can you, put this together for me? Yeah, so.
No, it's a great question, and it's something we get asked often a lot. We complement them, and the reason I say that is twofold. One is you'll always want to trust someone who can walk you through the ins and outs of taxes, because taxes can be straightforward, but they can also be very nuanced, and sometimes you need to understand the various, permutations and complexities, and for that, it's best to have an accountant, or at least someone who you can reach out to. Second is the fact that most people prefer to work through accountants for all their financial matters, not just their tax matters. Tax is just one thing that your accountant or your financial advisor will do for you. There's preparing your books, there's actual paying of the taxes, there's compliance with many other things beyond just tax that an accountant helps you with. So this is just one aspect of their relationship with their clients. And for us, the way we look at it is, for accountants, we actually want to help them make their job easier. So the way we've thought about our platform, the way we've designed it is, an accountant can easily manage several businesses. So think of yourself as one accountant. You have 10 clients. Each of them need their own profile or access on a particular system. As it is today, if you're an accountant with, say, 10 clients, you need to memorize 10 different logins, to go into each business and maybe, manage their tax details. But what we've done with Digitax is we've abstracted that. So if you log in as an accountant, provided that business has been mapped to your profile, you can actually access all of them much, much easier. So when you think of it from a productivity standpoint, you're actually much more efficient, and you can easily manage many, many more clients as opposed to what you do. So the limiting factor is time. So we try save you time through our software and our platform.
So you integrated onto, like in Kenya, you integrated to the KRA platform.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So as an accountant, if I log onto your platform, I don't need to log and on. You have my sort of history, and you've understood the businesses that I do my work for. I don't need to log into their individual profiles to be able to organize their taxes.
Well, in as far as filing or transmitting invoices, that you can do on Digitax. But the tax process has 3 steps to it. The first one is the data, so the receipts, the invoices, the purchases. That's what Digitax does for you. The second element, which is now the filing and the paying, you have to do that through your bank. But of course, you have to go and get like the invoice and the information needed to pay.
Right.
But that's a once a month thing right now. For the day to day, like each invoice, each purchase, Digitax can do that for you.
Right.
So we handle that first leg of the process.
Okay.
Which is where most of the work is.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you look at the full ecosystem of the tax business, so to speak,
Yes.
Tax agencies are very aggressive.
Yes.
Or perceived as very aggressive in collecting what their dues are, right?
Yes.
From where you sit, how come we've not been able to have an agency on the other side that, with equal aggression, pursues how these taxes are used?
No, it's a great question.
Yeah.
So if you think about the mandate of any tax authority, it's 2 things. One, they have to collect taxes as per laws and policies that regulates them. And then the second thing is account for how they've collected those funds. Now, in terms of how those funds are used, that's not the mandate of the tax authority. That's a mandate of the government through parliament and the executive. So not to say the question is not important, but then you always have to understand where each entity plays its role. So if there's anything on the Digitax end or the tax collection end, our role extends to the extent that we're only responsible for facilitating information that helps collect the taxes. Your member of parliament is one who should be telling us why is this not spent well. As a tax integrator, or even fairly speaking, as KRA, how it's spent is not really their scope. They are responsible for collecting as per laws passed. Yeah, so it's important to make that distinction.
But I mean, so I hear you.
Yeah.
But I feel like because of the process that any tax agency is involved in, the perception, the way that I will perceive you, me as a taxpayer, will the way that my money is used will determine how I feel about you. So for example, if I felt like my taxes were being used appropriately and in the right places, and I could actually see a difference, then maybe I don't have this big, proverbial
hesitation.
Yes, screw you to the Kenya, the tax agency, right? And maybe you don't have to do that much PR work to be like, actually, like we are a good people, and So I feel like if you cared about or a tax agency cared about the journey a bit more, maybe. But anyway, that's a philosophical question nonetheless.
The way I would think of it is this way: taxes are eternal. Yeah, I like telling people tulizipata tutaziacha. For the non-Swahili speakers, we found them and we leave them. Yeah, and the reality is it's one of the guarantees quotes of life.
Yes.
Now the question is valid. The way we think of our role as Digitax is, since taxes are there and they have to be collected, how do you give you the best experience from a digital standpoint to ensure that it's a seamless experience? So if you think about it, there's the things you've mentioned, but then also is do you want to make it a difficult process on top of everything else you've mentioned?
Yes.
So our role is, okay, the part we can manage and control, let us simplify the process as much as possible. Yeah.
Fair enough. But to you personally, you're not necessarily a tax expert.
Yeah.
Because before this, you were at Twiga Foods, right?
Yes.
So have you always been solution driven, so to speak? Like, have you always tried to, solve things? Because even with Twiga Foods, if I understood exactly how it worked, again, it was an application that was built to try and, again, help farmers and assist a broken supply chain or try and make it more efficient. Right?
Yes.
So has that been like your career path, like trying to see systems or places that are broken or that could be more efficient and try and develop tools for those?
Yeah, so how I ended up with founding Digitax is actually two correlated but distinct experiences. And by the way I look at it is, if you're in business, you have to know taxes, because if you don't, it will come to bite you. But my journey on this started, maybe 12, 13 years ago, when I first started my business. My first business was a consultancy. And I remember I had a client who said, I sent an invoice and I'm willing to pay, but I need you to send me a VAT invoice. Now, I just started, so I don't even hit that time. I think the threshold was 5 million a year to qualify for VAT. So I was like, okay, let me figure this out. So I called someone and I'm like, okay, I need to generate a VAT invoice. So they started explaining to me about buying a device. I'm like, oh, okay, no problem. So I got a device, and then I started interacting with the device, and then that was where now my software and technology instinct came into play. Because I remember with that device, first of all, I had to be trained. It's not just something to go and say, I want an invoice for 10,000. It was like dealing with a very, I think even a plane is easier to handle. But I remember I had to press the keys in a very specific sequence. And if you don't, you can end up, locking the device, or it can refuse to print an invoice. And of course, you're looking to get paid, so that was a no-no. So I had this piece of paper I printed, put against the wall, and every time I went, I had to then remind myself, okay, what's the sequence? You start going through it, and that was each and every time. So I called my accountant, and I'm like, is there an easier way? I'm like, no, that's actually the easiest way. Like the other options in the market are actually much more complex. So this is what, 2011. I was like, wow, there must be an easier way. At that time we're getting used to, mobile money, getting used to smartphones, and life was very, very convenient from a technology standpoint. But this felt like 2-3 steps back, just in terms of ease of use. So it's like, okay, it is what it is. Let me generate the invoice because I'd like to get paid. And that went on and on. And then fast forward, I joined Twiga Foods. We had to set up a tax system on our platform. And at that time now, there was a bit of an improvement because we had now moved from ETR to Teams. So Teams was still a device, but you could, plug it into your network and send data to it. Then that device sends data to KRA. So it was somewhat of an improvement, but you still had to buy a device. So, be as it may from a timing standpoint, in 2023, KRA then moved from Teams to eTeams, where they're like, okay, no more devices. It'll all be software-based. And in addition to that, we are going to look at capturing, we're going to widen the tax net. So not just VAT taxpayers, but individuals as well, if you're in business or you're trading. And I had just left Twiga Foods at the end of 2022. So when I thought back to my experience then and the fact now that this opportunity has been presented, I thought it was a good time for me now to apply both my business skills and technology skills to build something. So that's how Digitax, came to be from a timing standpoint. And then, we spent 2023 building the software and getting it certified, because we have to go through a certification and licensing process. And then we officially launched in the market in January last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's been quite a journey.
Yes, it's been quite a journey.
Okay. So maybe we can just work back even before, before you get to this point, before you start your first business and all those things.
Yeah.
Where did you grow up? What part of Kenya, Nairobi, or the world did you grow up?
Yeah, so I was born and grew up in Nairobi. Did my primary school and high school in Nairobi. At that time, the school I was in had just introduced computer studies as a subject. So it was one of my electives for KCSE. And that was very interesting because I remember we had to build a software for a dairy farm. I think that was the exam for that year. And wow, that was quite a journey, because I remember the software the school decided to use was called Pascal. Now, Pascal was a software built in the 70s, for those who know that space. And, you couldn't even things like building a user interface, like what most people interact with, was a very time-consuming process. But anyway, be as it may, I really enjoyed it. So I did that, and I was like, okay, actually, you know what, I want to focus on this. My other interest at that time was commerce or accounting. But between the two, I was like, okay, let me focus on computer studies. So that was through to the end of high school. Then I got an opportunity to spend 1 year in Japan after high school. So went there.
Who gave you the opportunity? How did the opportunity come about?
So it came about because as I was doing my Form 4 project, I got really interested in robotics and hardware. And back then, Japan was like known as the global headquarters of anything to do with robotics or hardware. So that's why I wanted to go and act like, just get to see what it's all about. So I spent 1 year in Japan. I learned Japanese. I did pre-university as well. And my 12 months there, I would say, were very eye-opening. east or west home is best, but it's always good to go and experience other places. So that 1 year was very eye-opening. And when I came back at the end of 12 months, I was like, okay, I've seen what's there. I've really enjoyed my time. So I'm now ready to do my first degree. So at that point, I then went to Australia, spent 4 years there. I did now my degree in engineering. And then I came back at the end of 2010. So when I left, I remember M-Pesa had not even launched. Yeah. Right. So when I came back, it was like 3-4 years in. Of course, now people are used to it. So the first thing I did when I came back is I had to teach myself, okay, how does M-Pesa work? You know, what's been happening in the tech scene over the past 3-4 years. So came back, and then shortly after I came back, I joined Strathmore. So Strathmore started a scholarship program in conjunction with Safaricom for a master's program. So I managed to get an opportunity there, and did my studies at Strathmore. So that was my education journey. But while at Strathmore is when I also started my first business, the consultancy. And now that's when I had to now try to generate that invoice that gave me headaches.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
When you were growing up, did you think that you were wealthy as a kid? I don't want you to put on your retrospective hat on. Yes. I want you to be a kid as you're growing up and playing around. And did you feel like you were wealthy, or did you feel like we don't have money? Or
no, I felt my parents gave me opportunity where they could. So, when growing up, you're always asking for things and you're being told no. Yeah. I remember the one request I made and they afforded it to me was asked for a computer. And that was when I was, I think, 14 years old. I said, I'm really keen on computers. I'd like to have one. And that's even how I started wearing specs, because those days the screens were these like big bulky screens, and you had to buy an anti-glare screen.
I remember that. And it would bulge, the screen would bulge on
exactly.
this side and on that. Anyway.
Both sides, So I didn't buy the anti-glare screen, and within 6 months of buying the computer, I was told, okay, now your eyesight has been impacted, so I needed to get specs. But that's when I now started like really interacting with computers. But then the way I would look at it is the opportunities I was given, I tried to make the most of it. So there's some things I was afforded the opportunity of having access to or owning. And, my parents always like, our job is to educate you. Then you figure out
what's next?
Your life. Okay. So my mindset was always whatever tools I can get when I'm growing up. Once I'm done with my studies, it's me versus the world.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's how I'd characterize my bringing, the opportunities I was given, and to be clear, it's one of those things where I was like, when you interact with your colleagues, your classmates, there's some who are doing very well, there's some who are not doing so well, but the one thing that was constant is those who take up the opportunities presented to them, of course, will have a best chance at success in life. Yeah.
What do you think your parents do best with the money?
Great question. Save and invest. Save like it's going out of fashion.
And when were you conscious about this skill, this saving and investing skill that your parents have? When did you first get conscious about the fact that they have it?
I got conscious about it when I remember two distinct experiences. One is there was a pair of shoes I really liked, and I asked for it, and I was told, yeah, no problem. You find a piggy bank, put in coins. The day it's enough, we'll see if it's enough to buy the shoes you want. So automatically it meant I have to figure out how to save and earn it. The second one was a lot of what I had seen in terms of how they thought about big ticket expenses, especially like education. So for example, of course, as you grow, cost of education goes up, but it really shoots up when you want to do your final
if you want to
study abroad, even locally. The fees between high school and university, really, it's a material change.
Well, in one side, if you go
JAB.
KCP to no, Kenyan, let me call it, if you go Kenyan system
Uh-huh.
to British system,
Yeah.
back to Kenyan system, then it's no, because Kenyan system will be low, British system secondary will shoot,
It will go
and
up,
then
yes.
Kenyan system university will come back down.
But if you remember that time, I know now there's this whole banding thing in
Yeah.
terms of university fees, but at that time there was the parallel
Yes,
programs.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And I remember the way it worked is when you're in Form 4, you select the courses and what you'd like to do. And the Joint Admissions Board, JAB, would place you to choose for you the course and the school. And if you didn't like it, or you had another preference, you had to go and pay, I think, 15 times more. So even comparatively, even assuming you stayed in the local system, it was still quite expensive.
Yeah, good comparison.
Yeah, but tying that to your question, the whole idea there was save early for those big expenses. If you're a parent and you're waiting for then to think about how you support your child, it can be a very big leap. But if you're proactive and you save early, then
was it something that they told you? Like, were you aware that they were saving for your university?
I was aware,
Yeah.
and they made me aware.
Okay.
And I've also carried those lessons. So even me, I've started that journey. As soon as my children turned 1,
Yeah.
I said, okay, let me start saving.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to get to that point and you're like, okay, I'm now in a
fix.
in a headache, in a fix. Yeah.
A question based on your career path, right?
Yes.
If I'm to paint with a very wide brush,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I could say that from the moment your parents get you that computer at 14,
Yeah.
it sets you up to get into this tech space that
Yes.
you eventually end up thriving in your career, right?
Yes.
Right now, so I have, for example, I have 2 daughters, one who's 11, another one who's just a 9.
Yes.
And they are absolutely obsessed with gadgets, of course, right?
Yes,
As any child who's been exposed to a gadget will be.
Yeah.
Where do you draw the distinction between this is obsessive and not productive vis-a-vis a child engaging in an activity that could potentially lead to a career? I'll give an example. So I, as a parent, can insist, for example, that my kid, I don't know, reads or does something more traditional that doesn't necessarily give them a skill that they can monetize, as opposed to, for example, one of my daughters who loves to edit and create videos and animation things, and that's an actual skill that if she gets good enough, even at the age of 15, can monetize, right? So as someone, I guess, in the tech space, I'm asking, like, where do you, your philosophical approach to where do you draw the line between this is a possible monetizable skill that I can invest in my kid in, vis-a-vis this is harmful, and like in Australia they passed a law that I think a couple of either before the end of the year or like at the end of last year that I think you have to be 16 or older to have a social media account, and just that whole debate.
No, it's a great question, and I think as parents, it's something always top of mind. Now, in our time when we were much younger, computers were mainly for games, but there was also an element of using it for productivity or useful tasks as well. Of course, a big change is now there's mobile phones. Also, the computers and gadgets in general have become the main way we consume media. During our time, it was the TV, or newspapers, on magazines. Now everything is on the phone. So that has, of course, caused a big shift in how they are consumed. The way I look at it is, you have to be discerning as a parent and first ask yourself, okay, how much time am I willing to give my child on gadgets? Because I believe it has to be controlled. If you give them limitless time, then that's when you find all these, screen staring to the point it becomes a health hazard or a mental challenge if they don't have the device. The second thing is, okay, should I be intentional about what the child is doing? Because to your point, if they exhibit a certain skill, it had to have been triggered by something. Not just them randomly going on the computer and or on the device and happening upon it. It has to be very intentional. So what I usually do is I have educational apps I give them tied to, either what they're learning or what they've shown interest in. Now you can give them free screen time, but it has to be limited. The idea is also not to really clamp down to the point they feel it's excessive.
Mm-hmm.
However, it has to be controlled, and you have to guide them to what you feel is a potential area for them. So if you're a musician, or you can play an instrument or play the piano, for example, why not get them a piano app and have them practice, for example. That's positive use of technology. But if they spend the whole day swiping, then you ask them, what do you want to do in life? They say, I want to be a TikToker, or I want to be on YouTube.
But I mean, it's a viable
it's viable
career now,
It's viable, but it's viable from the perspective they're seeing other people. It's not that they've built. If you think about anyone who's a content creator, they have a skill they're communicating or showing to their users. Yeah. You could be a comedian, you could be good at bodybuilding, you could be good at skits. There's something else you're doing, and the channel is just a medium. If you say you want to be a TikToker for the sake of it, what are you going to
be showing on TikTok?
What are you going to be showing on TikTok? What are you going to be showing on YouTube? So it doesn't move away from the fact that you have to you have to have a skill, nurture the skill,
right?
And then use this as a medium to broadcast the skill,
right?
But being there, then saying, okay, nitafanya, it becomes now a whole other complex discussion with your children.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. Yeah. I guess back to your journey.
Yes.
So I mean, sounds like your parents invested quite a bit in your education, from the year in Japan, the time in Australia. Yeah. Do you have a rough estimate of how much you think your parents invested in you for you to have that sort of experience in that education at that point in time in your life?
Yeah, I've never. It's a good question. I've never done the math. Yeah. I know it's substantial, but then also one of the things I did when I was abroad is I was working. So the reality is, if you go abroad, it's not cheap, yeah. And I think that most people feel, okay, you can only ask for so much. And the good thing, depending on the country, they allow you to work a certain number of hours a week. So I looked at it more from a perspective of, okay, there's an income, but there's also an opportunity to get exposure. So I'd say also a substantial part of my costs while I was out of the country were covered by me through my work. But yeah, to your point, I mean, I'd probably have to sit and think, but if I was to estimate, you could buy, a few plots or a house somewhere. If you think about the totality of education from when you started to when you finished, it's a sizable investment. I mean, ultimately, as a parent, and I think that applies to those of us who are parents, we think of it as human capital. We're investing in your ability to go out and also be productive. So it's not. I know there's this notion sometimes that it's sunk cost, but I look at it the opposite. It's more an investment in someone's potential, and for them now to go and actually do something meaningful and be able to, I guess, invest in the next generation. So it was substantial. Yeah. I've never done the math. I wouldn't know, but I would assume it's
in the millions.
It's probably one of the biggest investments for sure. Top three. Yeah.
To push on the sunken cost theory.
Yes.
What do you think you would have not done for it to, even if it's begin to meager around, this potentially could have been a sunken cost? Like, if you invest that amount, I've had you reference kids, your own children. If you invest that amount, in your children, and they, I don't know, don't what's the correct term, live up to that, to the investment you've put in, do you think it would then be fair to evaluate it as a sunken cost? Or do you think the fact that you give them the opportunity is worth it?
Is it? Well, it's a good question. Yes. Actually, it's a good question. I look at it a bit differently. And this is now where I started looking at financial products. Yeah. So if it doesn't work out, God forbid, what you'd then have to do is first acknowledge, okay, you tried your best as a parent and it did not work out. But of course, in a scenario like in my case, where I have multiple kids, it's one of those things where like, okay, let not one that didn't work out. Yeah. One that didn't work out affect you thinking about the rest. Of course, it's something no parent hopes for because, I think in the African setting, we put our hopes in our children, isn't it? Yeah. And it's been that time immemorial. We invest in you go out, would like to see grandchildren, but also would like you to go and make good of yourself. Yeah. So it's one of those things where I think you always have to take a positive mindset to it. However, there are also ways to mitigate it financially. How? One, education policies. Yeah. So if you take an education policy, you get a payback at the end of it, but remember you're also adding interest. Yeah. So you kind of lessen the financial impact, assuming it doesn't go well. But also, the way I look at it also, because you have to look at it on the flip side. If your children are dependent on you, yeah, or you as parents for education, what happens, God forbid, you're not able to support them anymore. And this is now where things like policies come in place. So you have to look at it both ways. Yes, you could invest and it doesn't work out, but they're depending on you and you need a plan B. If for one reason or another, you're not able to provide financially the way you used to before, either through your work or, through investments, whatever the case may be. So I usually find education policies are very helpful in that respect.
If I was an insurance broker, an innovative insurance broker,
yes,
you said you have multiple kids and I come and I tell you, okay, so you have this education policy that you want to take.
Yes.
I want to offer you an insurance on education policy.
Yes.
And what my terms would be is in the event, you take out the education policy, invest it in your kid.
Yes.
It doesn't work out. You have an insurance.
Oh, no.
You have an insurance, and I can pay you back, I don't know, 30% of the amount that you took, the amount that you spent on the education policy. And you have to pay me a premium in order to be able to have that education policy. Do you think you'd take it?
So the thing is, two things. One is you'd have to, the thing about insurance, I realized, it's a very numbers-driven business.
Leave the insurance. This is me who has come as innovative insurance.
The reason I'm saying that, it would exist if people felt there is money to be made. But I don't think there's money to be made in that that kind of approach.
You will determine. Like if you tell me, yes, I would take it, or no, I wouldn't take it.
Yes.
I then can see. I'll tell you, I would take a policy like that. I'll tell you that right now.
No. I think I have a positive mindset on my kids. I think I would go that.
Yeah, but you're saying that now, and I mean, God forbid. Of course, this is absolutely hypothetical, and God forbid. But I mean, 15, 20 years from now, if you've spent 30 million and it's gone quote unquote down the drain, and you could have gotten 10 million of it back at the end of it and been like, guys,
I think that would be the realm of your child would even ask you now.
But then I say, look, guys, I spent 30 million.
Your child would be like, Daddy is just easy, guys.
What?
Are you investing in my potential failure? That's even you think about you when you went through school,
No, I'm not investing in your potential failure. I am covering myself in the event that you potentially fail.
It's like having divorce papers signed before you sign the marriage certificate.
No, it's like It's like a prenup. Is it not like a prenup? It's like a prenup for kids' education policies, where you're just saying, in the event things go south, I can be covered to some extent.
I mean, I've never thought of it that way, to be honest. I wouldn't look at it that way.
I think on a purely financial standpoint, like you remove the emotion from it, I think it makes sense. Don't you think it makes sense?
No.
You don't think so? Do you think so? You think it makes sense? Do you think it makes sense? No, well, it's 2v2, so
it's a draw.
It's a draw. Anyway, okay, interesting. I think anyway, I'll conduct a survey. We'll do an IG poll and see. Okay, anyway, all right. So I guess that sort of covers you up to university level. So
Yeah.
what's your first sort of job like, and how much are they paying you? What are you doing with your money then? Do you have a solid financial understanding?
Yeah, so my first job, I think I was 5.
5 years old.
5 years old. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
your first ever job.
That was my first job.
Yeah.
And of course, I couldn't legally earn something.
Yeah.
but-
What was the first job at 5?
So what I was tasked to do is there was a relative working on a construction site, and I happened to go there on weekends. And they're like, okay, so we have these funds that we have, and we need to pay the people who worked on the site, because as you know, construction is you're paid weekly. It was in bundles of 50s, 100s, 200s, and I was tasked with arranging them. Yeah. So think, okay, I'm 5 years old. Of course, I know what the numbers mean, but I need to arrange them in terms of, okay, this person needs 900, this person needs 1500. So I was tasked with arranging. I think I got 10 shillings for my effort, which I put in the piggy bank. But I was happy. It was my first job, so to speak. And then even when I was young, during the holidays, I would work with my dad. I would go with him to his work activities. I would ask, what can I do? So I benefited from getting a lot of like exposure when I was young. But then in terms of like formal, something I could like legally earn, when I went to Japan, I had an interesting job. So I found someone who was looking for a translator in quotes, but basically for Japanese tourists coming to Kenya and Tanzania, they wanted someone to teach them Swahili. Just like, basic Swahili to get by. So that was a very interesting gig, paid very well, especially for a student. And I did that for like 4 months. I did that. I also taught some of them English, because by that time my Japanese was at least conversational. So I taught them a bit of English. And then I came back to Kenya for a bit before I went to Australia. So when I went to Australia, I had a couple of jobs. First one was call center, market surveys, and what have you. It's a very it builds mental muscle, because no one wants marketing surveys. I'm sure you guys, when you get those calls, you're like, wait, let's talk another time. I'm busy or something. Yeah, but it builds your mental muscle. Sales is the art of many no's. Yeah, before you get a yes, and you need to build a thick skin for you to get to be able to handle that well. There are many people who, when they start out, and they're told, no, I'm not buying your service, I'm not buying your solution, I don't want what you're offering, it can dishearten them very quickly. But if you take like a very difficult space, like market surveys or sales surveys, you quickly realize 80% of the responses will be no. Sometimes even call, hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm calling about this. That's where the call ends.
Yeah.
You move on, yeah?
Yeah.
So I did that for a while. And then I also worked for a bank when I was in Australia. I did that for 1 year. And that was very eye-opening, because, banks, banks are fairly digitized, but at that time, I worked in a department that needed you to do a lot of manual entries. So you talk to a customer, you then go fill in on a tool that was built in the 90s. So it was running on MS-DOS. So those who know what MS-DOS is know what it is. But basically, I had to go and fill in a lot of data. So that was very eye-opening, because one, it was a big bank, processes, routines. It also taught me elements of things I find relevant today. So the bank I worked for was very big on things like privacy, data protection, how to handle customer data. So those are things I also learned on that job. And there was also the aspect of ensuring that you document everything very well. Yeah, banks. Banks are known for many things, but the one thing they do well is there's a paper trail for everything. Yeah, that's one thing I really picked up on my time there. So that saw me through to the end of university, and then I came back now at the end of 2010. When I came back now, that's when I joined Strathmore, but also started my consultancy. Yeah.
So what is your consultancy? And then maybe you can work us through your, I guess, work history from there, from the consultancy, how you get to Twiga, and then I guess we already know about Digitax.
Yeah, so when I came back, I wanted to try out something. I thought of getting like formal employment, but I was like, let me first see what I can do based on the skill I've brought in. And so that time it was mainly IT projects. So I would implement turnkey projects for companies. some were around mobile money. Some was building like CRMs, customer relationship management software. Some were ERPs. So different in nature. I did work with a company that imported cars, and they wanted a system to manage the whole logistics process. So no two projects were ever the same. And then before joining Twiga Foods, I co-founded a company called Flashcast. Now, Flashcast was a digital advertising platform which we installed in matatus, so public transport vehicles in Nairobi. And it was a scrolling text display, similar to the one you'd seen like Forex right. bureaus. And it would just show messages. So it had an internet connection, had a GPS, so we always knew where the device was. And we approached SACCOs and owners of these vehicles and said, okay, would like to install it and, co-share any revenue we make from advertising. So that was the first, that was really interesting because I now got to understand the dynamics of the matatu industry, how the whole relationship between the owner, the SACCO, and the county worked. So there was that whole learning that went about at that time. So I did that for 2 years, and then 2015 is now when I joined Twiga Foods. The reason I joined is it's when I met the founders, they had this big vision for solving food insecurity across Africa. And it's something all of us can relate to because you see how food moves, you're able to relate to the inefficiencies where the opportunity is. And so at that time it had been running for 1 year, but they had not built any technology. So they're looking for someone to come and help, like define the strategy, build the technology, get the whole solution up and running. So I joined as the founding CTO, just me initially. Yeah, and I spent 7.5 years there. So by the time I was leaving at the end of 2022, just the technology team itself had peaked to about 84 people because we were doing everything from software engineering. We were also running financial services for the business. So anytime we delivered, you could get it on credit. And then we were also managing the infrastructure, the network, and everything in between. So yeah, that was very exciting. I had a good time there. And then, that now led me to Digitax. Okay. Yeah.
What's been your, I guess, through that career journey, you've taken us through the career journey, what's been your earning up until the place that you're comfortable with sharing with the financially incorrect audience? What's been your earning potential and space through those years?
Yeah, so when I started, it was project by project. But ideally, the way, as a business person, you do the math, or someone in consulting, you'd say one project should last you 6 months, but the income should be 1.5x the time spent. Meaning, if it's a 6-month project, ensure you've earned enough to sustain you for 9 months because it takes time to get the next project. So this was back in 2011. I mean, I was young. I hadn't settled. So, even if you did your math and it equated to 50,000-60,000 shillings a month, you are okay. It was a manageable amount. Then when I started Flashcast, as an entrepreneur, you live by the day. You can't go with grand dreams of salaries and being employed. So at that point, it was mainly working through savings.
Right.
Then when I joined Twiga, of course, given it was a senior role, the prospects changed. Now, what also happened at that time is there was a lot of salary inflation in technology. And this was because, your big multinationals, your Microsofts, your Googles, they had shown interest in this market. This was also the time remote work was picking up, even before COVID and all that. So in the technology space, salaries went up really, 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 really quickly because, and I was on the other side because I'm trying to hire people, and they're like, okay, I like what you're doing. I like the direction Twiga is going. I just feel your offer is not in the range I'm
Can you give us an example of how quickly
Yes.
those salaries shot up because of the interest of these multinationals?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So I had an engineer who joined straight out of campus, and they're on just below 100,000. Within a year, they got an offer that doubled their salary. And then I met them a year later, and they're like, "Oh, I moved." Like, "Oh, how come?" I got another offer. My salary doubled again. Like,
so within 3 years?
Yes, I'd gone from 100, I think, to 400. Then I happened to meet them a few months ago. I'm like, okay, so how's life? What are you doing? And now he's quoting his fees in dollars. He works remotely.
Yeah.
And he earns what a CEO in Kenya would earn.
Yeah.
Because they are now they're earning above $10,000 a month. Yeah. So it shows you how quickly they shot up. Now, in any other industry, if you think about, say, banking, because I happen to know many bankers, when you start at the teller or an entry-level job, you may be on 50, 60,000. And if you really push and, do well, you'll maybe get to, 250, 300, a manager, mid-level role. But in technology, that's not been the trajectory. It's really gone quite high. Yeah. Now, it's great for those who are looking for a career in the software industry. And now with remote work, you can be working for a German company. For them, they like it because when they hire talent from Africa or from emerging markets, they can maybe reduce their cost by 25, 30%. But to the average Kenyan, that's a big bump compared to what the rest of the market is paying. So you'll find there's a certain category of software engineers that find it easier or better for them to work for foreign companies vis-a-vis local companies. So it's not unheard of salaries of $15,000 a month, $20,000 a month. And that's just like, I'm not even talking about CTO, senior management level, but very good engineers can command that kind of salary.
Do you feel like there's does it exist in a bit of a bubble which may potentially burst someday, or do you feel like it's secure and that demand for quality talent in engineers will remain at that level, or do you see someday it's stabilizing?
It'll remain, and now with the advent of AI, the reality is the good engineers will separate themselves from the pack. There's this notion of the 10x engineer, like whatever they do, they're 10 times more productive than the average engineer. Now AI will turbocharge that. You can easily become a 30 or 50x engineer if you know what you're doing. With AI, there's AI in the sense that you can use it to help you be more productive. But in the software space, there's also, you need to know what to use AI for and what not to use AI for. Because if you use it wrongly, you may find you spend more time fixing the output of what the AI tool gives you than the actual time spent you doing it yourself. But if you know how to use it, you know how to massage it, as they say, to get the right output, then you'll be able to you'll be able to be very, very productive, be able to do very, very well. So AI will help the great employees be more productive. And so what you'll see is companies will be willing to pay even more of a premium for that kind of talent, because what you'll find is someone will ask themselves, okay, should I get 3 very good engineers and give them the tooling they need? Or should I get 10 engineers and have more headcount? And you'll probably find the output is
less, if not the same. Yeah,
more or less the same. So that's a big change I foresee. So it'll continue to go up for a
They'll
certain
continue to be
segment.
very they'll continue to be very well paid.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
In terms of I guess the engineering skill, what
Yeah.
makes explaining to a layman, like what
Yeah.
makes a good like I've heard you say give the quote a 10x engineer. Like what core skill is a 10x engineer? Is it problem solving? Then you have the technical abilities, or like what would you say is the core skill that makes a really good engineer that can earn
Yeah.
that and command that kind of money?
So a good engineer is first of all they're efficient. When given a task, they take the shortest amount of time. But in addition to that, it's quality output, and it's output other engineers can build on. Yeah. Because I can be a good engineer, but I build something no one else can decipher. Or I can be a good engineer, but no one understands what I've done.
What you've done.
And you see, for companies, they always take a risk-based approach to some of these things. If your solution is great, but you're the only one who knows it, then how do I protect myself against your unavailability, or you leaving, or just the vagaries of life? So it has to be done in a way that other people feel they can benefit and build on top of what you've done. The other bonuses, like you can be a good communicator, you can be able to explain what you're doing to a non-technical audience, but those tend to be secondary considerations. Those the three I've just mentioned would be the primary ones. Yeah.
So efficiency.
Yes.
I guess the ability for people to be able to understand and decipher your work, and more importantly, be able to build on your work.
Yes, and the quality.
And the quality of the solution that you're
Yes,
giving.
yes.
Interesting. I mean, it sounds like three very basic core tenets, but
it's basic,
very
but
powerful.
Easier said than done.
Yeah.
It's the way you can have, a car. If a car is reliable, built well, and you know how it will always perform, you're willing to pay a premium for it. But if it's finicky, or it always has issues, you'll be hesitant. So it's the same thing in software engineering. Also, the good thing nowadays is businesses are able to correlate effort to output. Like, what's the ROT, return on time, or return on effort? So a team would always bias themselves to an engineer who can get good work done faster, because you can more easily quantify the return on time or investment or effort. So that's why you'll find their demand in the market will rarely ever go down. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that there's still a buzz around, I guess, tech startups and being able to raise VC money or being able to raise lots of money? Do you think that there's still a buzz, or are we like on the tail end of what? Because at the time it looked like there were a lot of
Yes.
they were calling it what, the Silicon Valley of
Silicon Savannah.
Yes. And there was a lot of money being put in lots of different companies. Unfortunately, a bunch of them have not quite worked out in the way that they did. And interestingly, actually, sorry, it's a bit of a lengthy question, but it's tied to, I don't know if it was a conversation we had that was on the record, off the record. I can't remember who it is, so I won't expose them. But there was Copia, then there was Sandy. Was it Sandy?
Yes.
There was Sandy. Anyway, there was a bunch of these, I guess, tech solutions that came, and I remember a person I spoke to's opinion was that the problem with the problem that they were trying to solve was unsolvable, because they were trying to use a tech solution for an ecosystem that didn't really require a tech solution, and the solution for it was different, but it was masked in this big buzz of tech. And so we make money off of tech, but the tech was never ever going to work if you looked at the solution pragmatically. I don't know if anyway.
No, good question.
Yeah.
Technology does not exist in a vacuum.
Yes.
And yes, we say tech, but tech ultimately has to solve something. Even just take the case of M-Pesa. Before M-Pesa, people used to physically move money. Yeah. And M-Pesa came to basically eliminate that step. Yeah. The origins of M-Pesa was, when sending money up country, you don't have to carry the cash. And of course, it's evolved into many other things. So the first thing to acknowledge is technology does not exist in a vacuum. So whether applied in logistics, in supply chain, it's important to also realize the role technology can and cannot play. So the reality is it's not as it's not as busy as it was, say, 3-4 years ago. It's driven both by internal and external factors. Now, the external factors are most of the investors were people who came with foreign capital. And foreign capital is very methodical in the sense that if interest rates are low, they'll hunt for other opportunities. If interest rates are high, the risk-adjusted rate has to be good enough for them to be willing to invest. So in 2021, the US Fed, materially increased interest rates. And that had a knock-on effect because all this foreign money was now saying, okay, I'm getting X% from treasury bonds. What can you give me? And that had a knock-on effect. Before that,
and if your return is not better than what I'm getting,
risk adjusted. So there's a return, and then because you're a startup, do I have a very high level of confidence you'll give me that plus X%? So the flow is usually that treasury rate. So the reality is investors overnight started saying, okay, we'd like to see more in terms of profitability. Up until that point, the diet had been, growth. Yeah. So you grow. As long as there's growth, more money comes in, and the cycle builds on itself. But this is not anything new. This is something that's been there time immemorial. Yeah. So it just works in cycles. So you're not a cycle where it's probably bottoming or has bottomed out. And there's likely to be a lot of interest in the next 2 to 3 years. The reason being, at the end of the day, nature holds a vacuum. So what you'll find is that the companies that can, see themselves through this period or start themselves at the right time, they will find funding is available. The other thing also is now it's been maybe 10 years since now this initial rush of investments came in. And so there's been enough time to see how businesses have performed. So, typically a VC fund is, 6 to 10 years. And so a lot of them are now like closing out their first fund in terms of it's their sunset period. So they're saying, okay, can we assess how our portfolio has done? Where did we do well? Where did we not do well? And now that's the basis of them deciding whether or not to invest or even how to go about investing, as the case may be. So those are the two factors like coupling the current, those are the two factors impacting the current investment climate. And what you're going to see is, there'll always be those who are saying, I feel I have an issue or I have expertise here. Let me look for companies that match what I'm looking for. Then you'll always have those who are, excited to invest because they've either done well or they feel, they have a duty to continue building the ecosystem. I think that the tech startups will still be there. For me, it's more a question of how you're applying technology. Is it a relevant use case? Is there demand for it? If there's demand and there's value, people will flock to it. Yeah. So I don't see that being a factor. The type of companies, it was more the timing of investments and how that turned out.
Okay.
Yeah.
As we wind up, so right now, what's your money philosophy? Where's your money at? What are the things you're looking at investing in? From the conversation, I can deduce you've put money away for school fees to some extent. And you don't want to take my insurance policy. Yeah.
Your bet.
It will come good.
Right. But money philosophy is teach them young. It's the first thing. Save early. Save as much as you can. Rule of thumb is try save at least 30% of your income towards investment, rainy day fund, whatever the case may be. If you can, look for outlier opportunities. I joined Twiga Foods when it was an outlier opportunity. It's not something that jumped at you, like selling bananas. Like, what is the tech? But underlying it was, food is needed by everyone. So technology can help. So at that time, it sounded like a very risky proposition. But I would say net, I had a good run there.
If you were to, sorry, just on the Twiga Foods, if
yeah.
you were to give me quantified by times X, because I'm assuming when you start getting in as a startup, you're not really making much money, the salary sort of output and things like that, vis-a-vis when you exited. If you can give us, I'm trying to figure out how you would quantify it, because I don't know, I don't want necessarily figures, but a percentage of how much money you potentially made, like if you said you've invested in 7 years in Twiga.
Okay.
I don't know if you understood my question.
Yeah. So I think back to it when I joined. If you put in $1, then as an investor, let me look at it from an investor standpoint. If you exited at the right time, you probably made 30x of your money for every dollar you put in. So at that time, and to tie to the previous question around cycles.
Yes.
Yeah. All these things, it's a function of cycles. Yeah. It's when you come in and when you leave. So the way I'd look at it is, when I think about my time there is beyond just my what I contributed. I felt I also got a lot of insights in terms of what investing means. How investors think about risky businesses, how they think about those businesses as they mature and grow, the metrics that matter, and how to position yourself. So even right now, where I'm CEO, I'm able to recall a lot of the lessons and learnings I had at that time. So for me, I look at it more like it's the money philosophies I have right now is also tied to being conservative in some respects, but also be willing to explore. At the end of the day, there's a saying, water follows a path of least resistance. Yeah. So if you think of your money as water, enable it to grow for you by identifying opportunities that equate to the path of least resistance. There'll always be those interesting, out there opportunities. If I told someone about Bitcoin, they don't know, 10 years ago, they would have thought you're crazy. Yeah. Now look, everyone is talking about it, and it's part of mainstream financial systems. So, what's your Bitcoin, if I may put it that way? Yeah. So, if you're in the estate or where you live, and you feel okay, no one is doing like a car wash, or no one has a barber shop. If you feel you have the financial bandwidth to experiment and try it out, you never know. That could be your path to multiples of returns. Because there's the things that will always give you the predictable returns. Bonds, I guess shares to some extent. There's investments you'll make, but you need to be willing to find, assuming you want to really give it a go, you want to be willing to find the 5, 10, maybe 15% you can spare and try things. The reality is not all will work. You have to go with the mindset, I may get 0 out of it, but you have to go with the mindset, I need to keep trying until I see what works.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good lesson. That's a good philosophy. I think I've definitely learned a lot from this conversation. And I still disagree with you on my insurance policy. I will attempt.
You should try be an agent for 6 months. Then you come back and you tell us.
I will attempt and see, because I'm like, what? There must be people who will think like me, other than Brad and I, who will take that bet. But thanks so much for coming on Financially Incorrect. Really appreciate you coming on, giving us your money journey, giving us a couple of lessons, giving us insight into Twiga and the software engineering space in Kenya, and just what it's looking like. Really appreciate it. I hope you guys at home have taken a lesson or two, and we will see you guys on the next episode of Financially Incorrect next Friday.
Cheers. Thank you all.